Hello.
Screen, admin, if that is possible.
Yes, you can share the screen.
Okay. Okay, so I don't know, I'm having, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I've been disabled.
Okay, let me make you a host. You can share it now. I've made you a host.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so can we see, I don't know, is it visible? Can we see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you very much. Okay, so as Joseph has said, my name is Chinyere Eyo, and it's such a pleasure to be here. I'll be taking us in the next 20 minutes on understanding violence against children. So let me start by just sharing basically some key facts about what violence against children is, what it entails. Firstly, that it involves and includes all forms of violence against people under the age of 18. I'm going by the Child's Right Act, which pegs children as all those who are below the age of 18, and that's where I'll be drawing my inference from. So all forms of violence, every act that inflicts pain, inflicts harm, or actions that has the potential to inflict harm and pain on children can be considered as violence against children. It can really be perpetrated against anybody, including those who are close to them, as well as strangers. Globally, we see that violence against children is a huge problem because the WHO states that about 1 billion children aged below the age of from 0 to 17 years are affected by violence as at last year, and that includes physical, sexual, emotional, and all that. And this violence that children experience has lifelong impacts, impacts their health, impacts their well-being, and their ability to contribute meaningfully to the society. So that's where the statistics was gotten from. Now, because of how much of a problem it is, in developing the Sustainable Development Goals, it was identified that violence against children can impact severely on us, the world at large, attaining our sustainable goals, being sustainable and able to achieve, the well-being of everybody. And so there are two of the goals in all of the development goals that addresses specifically violence against children. The first is the Sustainable Development Goal 5, which talks about achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls talking about the subsection 2 and 3, which addresses eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls. And SDG 5.3 talks about eliminating all harmful practices against children, such as early and forced marriage and FGM. Specifically also SDG 16, which talks about peaceful and inclusive societies, also addresses the issue of violence against children, talking about SDG 16.1, which states, which is working towards significantly reducing all forms of violence and related deaths, and 16.2, which specifically targets to end all forms of abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and violence, torture against children. Now, there are generally 4 main categories and 4 main types of violence that children can experience. The first is physical violence, that addresses physical harm, that talks about physical harm and injury that children can experience, especially from parents, from caregivers, and those who, significant others, those who are vested with the responsibility of taking care of them, as well as strangers, as I stated initially. It also has to do with severe punishment, especially in the country where we are, where we really believe in not sparing the rod, so that the children, will, can grow up meaningfully. But sometimes, there's a thin line between what exactly is discipline and what is punishment. And so many times, a lot of parents, a lot of caregivers overstep those boundaries. And so we've heard of children who are being poured hot water, who are being poured hot oil, who iron is used on, or iron rods and all that. And very recently, I don't know if we can remember, there were some reports in the news about a child who was locked up, with animals. This is a form of inflicting physical harm and injury. So it's any form of activity or action against that child that inflicts pain, inflicts harm. And even if you're trying to discipline that child, but it's done so severely that it's inappropriate for that child's age, and it does more harm than good. A second category is child neglect, and a lot of people do not identify this as violence against a child, but yes, indeed, and a lot of parents, caregivers are involved, in neglecting children. Where a parent or a caregiver fails to provide the basic needs of that child. And these needs can either be physical needs or care and attention. When you see a child is always unkempt, a child is not properly fed, a child, there is this form of segregation between, the house help syndrome and the actual children of the parents or the caregivers who this other neglected child is staying with. And the needs of the child are not being met, is not giving appropriate food, is giving remnants, or probably is punished by not giving food at all, is not adequately provided for. We see children sometimes going to school, and it's not that the parents cannot afford, but is being deprived. The child has torn uniforms, doesn't have shoes to wear, and all of that. So child neglect is yes, another form of violence that children can experience. Another form is emotional violence.
Okay, but can you hear now?
And this has to do,
maybe after
involves verbal abuse,
yes,
as well.
Where
such hurtful words are used against a child that is belittling, that is shaming, that is rejecting, that rejects that child, that makes that child feel less than who they are, that makes that child feel that he or she is less than a human being or less than other people that are around. We've heard some parents, caregivers use such words as, you will never amount to anything, you are a useless child, you're a dunce, you can never progress, you are foolish, you're stupid, using such hurtful words that actually go to the core, of the emotions of that child. Also, when a child is deprived of emotion. It is both neglect, but it's also at the same time emotional violence. Every child is supposed to be shown and given that love, care, attention, and affection that will enable that child recognize and identify, understand that he or she is a viable member of the society, irrespective of their age. And then lastly, among the major forms of violence against children is sexual violence. And we are seeing a whole lot of this coming up now in the media with, the abuse, the sexual abuses and the rape that continually happens in the society, presently. And it's basically, sexual abuse is basically divided into three major forms. We have forms of sexual violence that involves physical touch. In other words, the abuser makes contact with the child or causes the child to touch him or her or another person in sexual ways, where the adult or the other child, as the case may be, touches the survivor, as I would like to put it, the child in question, in their private parts, whether over clothing or not. Use of body parts in the genitals of the child, the vagina, the anus, or causing the child to touch another person sexually, that is a form of sexual violence through physical contact. But then we have other forms of sexual violence where contact does not occur, but the child is also exploited and violated sexually. When it comes to exposing that child to pornography, when it comes to exposing the child to content, either through sites or through maybe the child listens to sexual content, above the child's ability to comprehend, you find out that child also has been sexually abused. Also, when you engage a child in child pornography, in other words, the child is the subject and the object of that pornographic content, taking pictures of the child in sexual poses and all of that, you find out that is also, those are also forms of sexual violence. Then we have sexual violence that is technology-based, cyber-based. We have things like phone sex, cyber sex, or pornography that is simulated through technology using cartoons. We're having, a lot of parents, we need to be careful these days what we expose our children to, the media content, even cartoons. We find out that there are cartoons these days that have sexual content in it, and a child is exposed and is victimized or violated. We also have other forms of sexual violence, against children, talking about commercial sexual exploitation, and any child who is exposed to child marriage, by extension, is also exposed to sexual violence, if that child is expected to carry out their marital, responsibilities in that relationship. Now, there are other forms of violence against children, apart from these four that I have mentioned. One is bullying, which is unwanted aggressive behavior, which a child has to undergo from other children or groups of children. A child who goes to school and is constantly taunted, it involves physical abuse, it involves emotional abuse, by other children, where other children are gathered, or even online, where a particular child is being targeted by other peers, and made to feel, just making that child's life, horrible, that's bullying. We also have intimate partner violence, which is also referred to as domestic violence, which is violence that is perpetrated against another person in an intimate relationship, a romantic relationship. We know children today who probably are dating. When we refer to children, we are talking about, when we talk about children who are involved in probably romantic relationships with each other, with another child on child violence. We talk about date rape. So it's possible for a minor to rape another minor in a romantic relationship, or they are both in a romantic relationship and one of the children is inflicting harm or pain, or emotional violence, against the other. So all that is categorized under intimate partner violence. Sexual and gender-based violence, I think Wanda will be speaking about that, but children can also be exposed to this form of violence. And it's violence that has to do with the gender that is being perpetrated on the particular person because of their gender. And then we have other traditional, other forms of violence which are categorized under traditional and harmful practices, female genital mutilation, child marriage, as the case may be. Now, in order really for us to carry out evidence-based work, it's important for us to have facts and figures. It's important for us to know how bad. We may know, yes, because of experience, because of the work that we do, that a particular issue is a problem. But scientific facts and data help us help authenticate how bad the problem is. And so in 2014, the first survey of its kind in West Africa was commissioned, in Nigeria. The Violence Against Children survey was commissioned, and was carried out by the National Population Council with support from UNICEF, CDC, and some other funding partners. And I'm just going to be sharing with us some of selectors, a really robust survey, but because of time, I'll just be sharing with us, for the purpose of this training, some selected findings that came out as a result, of that survey that took place in 2014. It was actually launched in 2015, and in 2016, there was a call to action. 2015, 2016, there was a call to action by our President, Muhammadu Buhari, calling all stakeholders, civil societies, state governments, individuals, government parastatals to rise up to actually address the issue of violence, against children in Nigeria. And these are some of the findings that came out. The first is that, as we all know, there is a high prevalence of violence against children. And this was broken down by identifying that even before the age of 16, approximately 6 out of every child experiences one form of violence or the other. Now, this form of violence are some of the ones that I have talked about. It could be physical, emotional, sexual, neglect. So 6 out of every 10 children, for every 10 children randomly, you pick 6 of them before the age of 18, will experience some form of violence. Now, breaking it further, the survey showed to us that 1 out of every 2 children experience physical violence, again before the age of 18. Then 1 out of every 4 girls, in every 4 girls that you count randomly before the age of 18, 1 of them would have been sexually abused. And then 1 out of every 10 boys. So unlike popular opinion, boys, yes, do get sexually abused. It's not as rampant as the girls, but yes, they do experience. And with the work that I do, I see that, a lot of boys, do not come out because of the social stigmas that are around, them being boys and them being expected to enjoy the experience and all of that. For emotional violence, the survey shows us that 1 in 6 girls and 1 in 5 boys will experience emotional violence before the age of 18. Another finding that came out from that survey is that violence is rarely an isolated event. So, yes, violence is prevalent, but when it do take place, a lot of children experience violence, be it physical, be it sexual or emotional. They experience it over their childhood. So it's not just one occasion. In other words, we're not saying one child just experiences physical violence, just one during their childhood, and that's all. But they have they experience violence multiple times during their childhood. And then secondly, for every child that experiences or has to endure violence, they go through more than one form. So we see for every case of sexual violence, obviously emotional violence is involved, but there could also be forms of physical violence involved, especially where there is rape or where the child is forced to accept that violence. Sometimes also when there's physical violence, a child is being beating or harm inflicted, you find out that a lot of hurtful words are used to degrade and humiliate that child. So we see that children who are exposed to violence go through multiple forms of violence over the duration of their childhood. Other key findings that came out as a result of that survey also shows that this violence that children occurs really at a young age, and this is really really difficult, to bear. When you hear cases of children in our organization, we've attended to children as young as 15 months, being sexually abused, and all of that. We see children, 3 years old being exposed to horrendous cases of physical violence. A child of 3 being told that he or she is a dunce, he or she is a fool, probably because the child makes a childish mistake. So we see that violence occurs at a young age. Also, that perpetrators are overwhelmingly people who the children know. Yes, we have strangers who inflict pain and violence on children, but the research shows us that majority of those who violate children are actually known by these children, are actually probably even trusted, have been given the responsibility of taking care of these children, but they take advantage of their position as adults in the lives of these children to violate them. Thirdly, is that sexual violence particularly occurs in places where children are expected to feel safest. And so from the survey, it was identified that the places where children experience sexual violence the most are in the homes of the perpetrators, in their own homes, and on their way to from school and in school. So you see, the home and schools are places where children should feel safe, but you find out that that's actually where they experience a lot of this violence. And you can really connect it with the key finding that says that the perpetrators are overwhelmingly people who these children know. So you see that they are living in homes and they are being abused and violated by people that they know at home. They go to school and they are being violated and abused by people who are in school, who are supposed to be custodians over them during that period when they are in school. Also, as bad as the problem as violence is, as prevalent as it is, we still see that children are not speaking out. We see that they are not seeking and they are not receiving services. And why is this so? First is that it was identified that the children do not know where to seek help. That the majority of the children, a lot of them who even go through violence, the survey found out that majority of them just tell their friends, They just tell their friends, this is what my auntie did to me, this is what my uncle, did to me. And particularly for sexual violence, a child will more readily report, if at all, that he or she was beaten, or see what my mama tell me. But when it comes to the issue of sexual violence, it's like a silent epidemic because of the layers of shame and stigma and victim blaming that the child has to go through when he or she speaks up. He's made to feel that he or she must have done something to warrant that abuse being done, and so they would rather not speak up. And even if they do want to, they really do not know where do they go. The police stations are not an option, for them. Another reason another factor around that was identified from that survey shows that even if they do know where to go to, they are unwilling to seek help for several factors, as I've mentioned. The fear of shame, the fear of stigma, the fear of being punished, the fear of reporting an adult is like abomination. An adult is over you. How will you report me? How will you report your mother, or your father, or your uncle who is taking care of you? It's part of the upbringing, and so they are expected to endure whatever pain as part of the training of making them adults, and so they'll be unwilling to seek help because of some of these factors. Also, we also see that because they are not speaking out, they are not receiving help, it has serious impact in their lives, in their well-being and future. We're going ahead to look at some of the impacts that this has. First, of the effect, which I feel is really huge, is that it leads to negative coping and high-risk behaviors amongst these children who have been abused, which also leads to various issues around mental, and various problems, around their mental health. So we see that a lot of children, and this has been proven through research, a lot of children who have been exposed to violence, they take to coping with things like drugs, things like alcohol. Some of them take to other high-risk behavior as having multiple sexual partners. Some in a bid to try and get feel some form of worth, that they are wanted and they are valued, even if it's just for their bodies. Some because they have been sexually violated and they take that as a norm. Some internalize the abuse, the sexual abuse that they have gone through, and now become addicted to different forms of of sex. So they engage in and then we now see, because of these negative coping behaviors and high-risk behaviors that they become involved in, we see that children who have been exposed to violence have a whole lot more mental health issues, anxiety problem, issues with depression, issues with an inability to cope and to function even as adults. Now, also because of the high-risk behaviors, because of the pent-up mental health issues, we find out that as they grow up into adults, they now begin to come down with a lot of non-communicable diseases like cancer, diabetes, high blood pressure, and the likes. We see that violence also in the long run impacts the opportunities and the future, of our children. We see children dropping out of school because of violence that they are made to go through, either in school, or from home, and their inability to cope, positively with what they are going through. They drop out, from school. We also see cases where because they internalize the pain, they begin to internalize the pain that is being inflicted on them. They also now perpetuate this violence. So we see children who were hurt as children now become adults who hurt other children or who hurt other people in their lives. And so they have problems getting jobs, they have problems holding down jobs because of negative coping behaviors they've taken up, or they've taken up to try and cope with the emotional trauma they are going through. A lot of people who are violated come up with different forms of addiction that makes it difficult for them. So you see, it's not just as simple or as simplistic, as a lot of people take it to be. It has a whole lot of problems and issues, that children have to deal with. Unintended pregnancies, either because of the high-risk behaviors that they are exposed to in trying to cope with the violence they are going through, or because they are sexually abused and raped as a form of violence inflicted upon them, and so they come up with pregnancies. And because of these pregnancies, they try to abort, come up with different gynecological problems. They have STIs, including HIV. Of course, injuries, severe injuries are also involved. It impairs their brain and nervous system development, and some ultimately lead to death. Attempts at suicide, and some actually succeed at committing suicide as the final way of coping. I can't even cope anymore. The best thing, is just to kill myself.
All right, ma.
Then we have my time, right?
Yes.
Okay, so okay. So let me just try and run. So we have these laws and policies, that help regulate the environment where violence against you, the Child Rights Act, the VAP Act, the Trafficking in Persons Act, the UBE, and different policies. As then we have risk factors, that makes it easier, for children to be violated, and it occurs both on an individual level, in their relationship with other people, on a community level as well as on the societal level, different factors that that predisposes these children to being sexually violated. Now, how can it be prevented? What can we do? How can we respond? There are several strategies. If you see the first letter of each of the 7 points there will form the word inspire. So there are 7 strategies, the inspire strategy, which can be used holistically or individually, depending on the capacity of the CSOs involved. And it can even be taken up. Whole nations have actually taken up this strategy as part of the national strategy to address violence. Implementing the laws, addressing norms and value change, creating safe environments, parental and caregiver support, especially for new parents, parental skills on how to bring up children, income and economic strengthening activities so that the economic status will be improved to provide for the children, providing response services in terms of psychosocial support and crisis response when issues do happen, secondary prevention, and then education and life skills, enrollment, retention, and life skills education. And finally, what is our role as individuals? It's not just about the government, it's not just about whole civil societies, but as individuals, as an advocate against violence against children, what can you do? Question suspicious situations that involve children. Be involved in raising awareness in your little social media page, in your church, or where in your community, in your neighborhood, in your home. Raises awareness. Create safe spaces where children are free to express themselves, where they can talk. Be vigilant and report cases. If cases are not reported, they cannot be addressed. Work towards challenging norms and practices which normalizes violence against women and girls and support aggressive behavior in boys. I don't even have time to go into that. And then finally, support survivors who have been violated as children. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ma. You really done justice to the topic.
I'm really sorry for the time.
Yes, it took about 30 minutes, but that is worth it anyway. Thank you so much. So because of time, we're supposed to have give 2 people or 3 people to ask questions, but we can only allow 1 person to ask question before we move to the next topic. So if you have any question, just indicate and just use 30 seconds or 40 seconds to ask question and she can respond. Okay, I assume we don't have question. Okay, so our next speaker is already here, Mrs. Wanda Ebe.
I have a question.
You have a question?
Yes, I actually raised my hand.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Okay, quickly concerning the pornography part, I'm asking Mrs. Chinyere, please.
Okay.
Exposing child to pornography. Now, there's this school of thought that there is a set of people that feel that it's no biggie to maybe bathe with your child, and all that. So you listed some things: pornography, internet, technology, but isn't parents bathing in front of the children or dressing up in front of a child? And is that not pornography? Is that not pornography already? And if there's an age range, okay, because some people will feel, okay, it's normal, my child is still a baby. At what age do you ensure that you don't dress up in front of your child, most especially opposite sex and all that? At what age do you now start putting that into focus? Because a lot of parents do not know, a lot of guardians do not know.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Let me just say that in our sexualized society, it's important now that parents become aware that there are certain things that we do that we further sexualize our children, as bad as the sexualization problem is. Pornography is a huge problem. That's a topic on its own altogether, but it has been identified that it has links to actually encouraging and increasing sexual violence against children and exposing our children to become more curious. Talking about sexual education and all that, I would say as young as the child, just make what you tell your children age appropriate. About dressing in front of the child, make it as part of the culture, because it's part of teaching children boundaries. So I will not say there's a particular age. Just try and be conscious of the fact that there are certain things that I cannot do, because it's not like you're dressing in front of your child to a point, and then at some point you now say, okay, it's no longer okay. So make it as part of the culture, in your family, at home, that you do not dress, you not expose yourself, to your children, and try teaching them, private part, public part, and why it's important for them to create these boundaries and not allow, people touch them in places, or even expose them to things that they should not, be exposed to, at whatever age, because even teenagers can be sexually abused, coerced, and manipulated, into violence.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ma. Before I invite the next speaker, I just want to let us know that at the end of this training, we will administer a quiz or attendance register. So all of you who participated will register before we can send the certificate of participant for participation. And also, we also ask few questions. So that will also let us know how far you've learned what we are doing here. So let me allow Wanda Ebe to continue. Mrs. Wanda.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
How many minutes do I have?
You have 15 minutes, but we'll add 5 minutes to it. Mrs. Eyo has taken 5 minutes from your own, but I know you can do that.
Right. I'll try.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm speaking on gender-based violence.
Yes.
And when we hear gender-based violence, the first thing to me that comes to mind is inequality. That's the first thing that comes to mind before I try to define what gender-based violence is. And gender-based violence is the most notable human rights violation in all societies. It's in all societies. That means it's not only in Nigeria. Across the world, globally, people experience gender-based violence. It's not peculiar to only Blacks or only whites, but like I said, it's a global problem. And the gender-based violence is directed against a person because of their gender. So it could be a man or it could be a woman, but more women and girls experience gender-based violence, and that's why there's more focus on women being abused. And when we speak about gender-based violence, there are majority of victims of gender-based violence, and there are several forms of gender-based violence. Like I said, men and women can experience gender-based violence, but more women experience gender-based violence. So I'm going to mention a few types of gender-based violence that we experience in our society as the context of discussion. Domestic violence is one of it. Sexual violence is a form of gender-based violence. I think it would be nice for me to explain every point as we go so that I just trash them. And if you can take down anything or grab whatever it is, to be nice. So domestic violence happens every day in our society. You find out that there are several cases of men beating their wives, and or the other way around, or women beating husbands, but to have more men beating their wives. And I'm going to focus on the women, since we have more cases of women being, violated, women and girls. So you find out that a lot of women are being abused physically, emotionally, mentally, psychologically. We also have the economic harm or suffering to women, which is in a situation where maybe a woman gets married to a man, and then maybe she had a very good life, maybe she was working, and the man decides that because you are my wife, I will not allow you to work. That's a form of violence as well, of gender-based violence, because you're robbing her of her rights, you're robbing her of her freedom, and every knowledge that she has acquired, every skill she has acquired, she's being deprived of putting it into use. So you can imagine what will run through such a person's mind mentally and emotionally. So it's a form of abuse, but a lot of people do not even speak about this form of abuse because maybe their religion do not permit them. Like, for example, in Islam, you know, the wives are expected to stay at home. It's called kunle, and they're not supposed to even step out of the house to go to the market. They're expected to remain in the house while the husbands bring everything that they need to them. So we even have a lot of graduates who, you know, suffer such violence, form of violence, which is economic harm. And we also have, you know, situations where some men feel that if a woman is working, you know, she will automatically rub shoulders with them, and it's not going to be defined who the head of the house is. So the woman is not allowed to work. We also have other forms of violence against women. We have female genital mutilation. I'm sure we all know what that is. And several cultures in Africa practice female gender mutilation. And it's no woman wants to be in that position. But I mean, it's so cruel, and it's still practiced up to date. Cyber violence against women also happens. On the internet, you know, you find people, you know, sending abusive messages. It could be verbal, and, you know, a lot of bullying goes on the internet. So there's still cyber violence against women. And we have widowhood rights. There are several cultures or ethnic groups in Nigeria that maltreat widows, and the culture permits for it. A lot of times when men die, the first suspect, you know, the first cause of death or suspect is the wife, and she's been maltreated, she's forced to take oaths, sometimes they scrape their hair, sometimes they lock them up and deprive them of eating, and sometimes they don't even allow them freedom. They give them uniforms, dress codes, what they should wear that period. They beat some of them, and so, you know, in some cultures, they mop the body, they mop the corpse and give the water to the women to drink. All these are several forms of violence against women. We have threats. You know, a lot of people feel that because they're in a place of authority, they will threaten women or girls, you know, and abuse their positions and put women in fear, put the person who is being abused in fear. And so psychologically, the person is not all right. And I will talk about sexual violence too. We know that there are several rape cases that have been reported and some not reported. But every day in our society, sexual violence happens against women and girls, and even boys, like I said. But I just choose to focus more on girls because we have more cases of female gender-based violence. So girls are raped, you know, and most times you would agree with me that rape comes with physical assault. There's no way a rapist will come to a woman or a girl without physically abusing her. Because, of course, rape is sex without consent. So there's no way it's going to be done peacefully. women get beaten. We have seen cases every day where young girls were raped and murdered. So, you can imagine that they were definitely physically assaulted before it led to the rape, and then hence, they still decided to murder them. We mentioned the case of Uwa, the Barakat case, and several other cases. We even have our young infants, our toddlers, who have also been raped, and all these are forms of abuse, gender-based violence that we can't overlook and we've been making noise about over the period. There are also other, verbal abuse. We have harassment in public places, which we do not even take seriously. Sometimes you walk into the market or you walk to the market and you find, traders, boys whistling at you, calling you names, groping, and, creating unnecessary attention in public spaces. So this is also gender-based violence, because, a woman or a girl should be free to walk about freely, should be free to walk about anywhere without being harassed. But in our society, gender-based violence is a norm, and it looks like there's nothing wrong with it. If not for the campaigns these days and a lot of awareness creation that civil society organizations, have decided to embark on to make it a big deal, I'm very sure that it will even keep getting worse every day. And gender-based violence have been such a very, very big problem in our society and has been overlooked. I'm saying that it's been overlooked because the right actions are not taken most times. A lot of perpetrators of gender-based violence go scot-free, and out of maybe 100, only 6 might be punished, and sometimes, in most cases, reduced punishment. So it's quite difficult to tackle gender-based violence in our society. It's been very, very challenging, and it makes it also very difficult for victims to be able to speak. It makes it difficult for victims to report or even share with anyone or take any action, because a lot of times when we go to security agencies or the right authorities, they don't take the right action, necessary action to handle this matter. But as a matter of concern, we can all, with hands on deck, make things better, because gender-based violence, we can make things better if we keep lending our voices and keep saying that it is everybody's business, and it's not only the business of the police. If the police has failed us, we can also take other, alternative options to curb this social menace. And a lot of times, our culture also permits for it. So with continuous advocacy, I'm very sure that one day the right things will be done, and maybe some of these stiff laws and rules will also be reviewed. But I must say that there are several ways also that we can try to minimize gender-based violence. For example, domestic violence. And we'll continue to advise as we work in the forefront with community members, if we can also teach them to promote peacekeeping, it will make sense. For example, if you're in a relationship with an abusive person and there are heated arguments, or maybe you notice that anytime there's an argument or there's a misunderstanding, the first thing your partner does is to, pick up a fight. It would be nice to just maybe play the fool, let me use that word, instead of also engaging in those conversations to push for it. And then for rape, I won't say that we can prevent rape, But we can also take precautions. We can take precautions. We can have self-defense, trainings for every female or every vulnerable person. And then we can also take precautions like something South Africa did some years back to help reduce rape. Like they used this anti-rape device, and it really helped them to be able to arrest a lot of victims, or a lot of suspects, a lot of rapists. It was very, very useful, with that move really helped. And they also made use of things like siren underwears for children with codes, and the children had like the passwords to those underwears, so that anybody who tries to forcefully take it off in schools or churches or anywhere, children gather to play, their alarm will just, blow up, and then people will run to that child to make sure that the child is safe. Because I'm mentioning all of this because there's a way we can actually, work without depending 100% on the government to act a lot of times, to also reduce our frustrations. So these are some of the ways we can try in our own way in the society to curb gender-based violence. A lot of sensitization to the opposite sex will also help the main perpetrators of this abuse. More men abuse women and girls. So it would be nice to also focus campaigns and trainings on behavioral change, and promotion of women's rights, so that the men or the male gender will understand that women have rights and consent is very important. A lot of times in our society, men do not understand the concept of consent. And so they feel that a woman's body is their right, a woman's life is their right. You hear some people say things like, I paid her bride price, so what I would do whatever it is I want to do to this woman. If I want to have sex with her, whether she's in the mood or not, I paid the dowry, so I will do whatever I want to do. So we hear those kind of things from learned people and even illiterates. And so if we decide to take on a lot of community dialogues, and campaigns, and maybe the media focus our movies or short clips on the right thing that ought to be done, people will learn even down to the grassroots on how to treat the female gender. And that will, I'm very, very sure that will also, reduce gender-based violence. It's going to reduce, rape. It's going to reduce sexual harassment. It's going to reduce all forms of discrimination against women. And if we can also take advocacies to our local chiefs and community leaders and all other gatekeepers on review of harsh cultures or harm cultural beliefs, it will also go a long way, especially for like widowhood rights. There are still a lot of communities that also practice wife inheritance. I didn't mention it, but that's also a form of gender-based violence, because a man dies and then a woman is not allowed to remarry outside of that family. She's being forced to either be inherited by the late husband's brother or uncle or anybody they choose in the family. So these are some of the practices that could be reviewed by our community leaders and local chiefs.
All right.
Did you say something?
Okay, just to remind you the time. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've said basically almost everything. And then early marriage is also a form of gender-based violence, because, sorry, this is the last point I'm just going to drop. Young girls are forced to get married pretty early, and we all know that the age of consent for sex is 18 and above, and we have children below the age of 18 who are married. So you can imagine how much rape goes on in our society. So there are too many forms of of gender-based violence. We can't mention each and every one of them, but I just made sure I highlighted the few that I had.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. You have really done justice to the topic. Gender-based violence is a very big issue in Nigeria. And of course, since this year, there have been, so many incidences of rape. And of course, she also mentioned so many points why we are also holding this training, because the essence is for us, after this training, we'll look at various areas we can really take action. And I mean, without wasting much time, maybe I will just give one person or two time to ask questions. So if you have a question, please kindly indicate.
I have indicated, I don't know if somebody else has a question.
Okay, you can go ahead.
I also have a question, please.
Okay. Okay, so let's go with you, madam. Your question?
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Funny enough, if I'm to read all the questions I have following this gender-based violence, it's going to be like a whole textbook and all. I have a series of questions. Now, there's a domestic violence, beating of wives and all that. What is the punishment? Now, it's one thing to say that, okay, if you it's not good to do this. What is the punishment attached to, offenders of this? Now, there's another one. Hello?
Yeah.
I'm being distracted, please.
Yeah, go ahead. I have muted.
Okay, so what makes it different? Now, that's one. What is the punishment attached for beating wives? That's domestic violence. Now, female genital mutilation. What makes it different from masculine mutilation? Because what they do for the women, they do it for guys. So what makes it different? Because if we're going to be speaking, if we're going to be trying to combat most of these things, we need to have deep understanding of this things, because they might ask questions. That's that. Then lastly, yeah, dressing. Okay, so I'm trying to play the devil's advocate now, right? She mentioned when you're going along the way and some guys are whistling at you and all that and all that. I have experienced that growing up, so I think I have an understanding of that. I've seen that. Now, it is agreed that it is wrong to do that, but in a case, the late Archbishop said, dress the way you want to be addressed. I'm not speaking against it. I'm just saying, when these questions come, how do you attend to them? Now, you see someone dressing odd and they're whistling at you and they're calling you, does it mean that gender, we're free to act anyhow, or dress anyhow, so long as nobody disturbs us? I think there are also things that can provoke some people's responses, or some people's actions. So are these things also going to be looked at? That. Then lastly, there are two things: how to handle abusive partners. She said something very key, which is, if you know that you're in a relationship with an abusive person, then it is wisdom to know how to attend to that person if the person is beginning to act. So I also think if we're doing sensitization for the opposite sex on how to address address ladies and all, I think we should also look at how to teaching how to manage behavioral patterns in people.
Exactly.
Not everybody is going to be calm. Not everybody is going to be quiet. There are some people that are going to be hot tempered. Yes, I might not be able to stay there, but there are people that are in that relationship. So I think a training on also how to handle the different temperaments, the different behavioral patterns of people will also be key. Then lastly, this one is a very strong one. I'm a married woman. So, and my Bible tells me that depriving depriving your partner, or sorry, your husband or your spouse of sex is is a sin. Now, I have been in some arguments and I see people arguing that someone say you should not force her if she says she's not interested. Agreed. Agreed. I am a woman. I don't think I want to be pushed or forced. Now, in another case where some people also say that, but if you deprive me in the name of you're not interested or you're not in the mood or you're not this, you're not that, at the point, you're also depriving me. So where do we put a balance to this? Because women will raise that as a guide, women will raise this as a guide, and the men or whoever will bring this back up and say, even the Bible says it's a sin. So where do we draw the, where do we get the balance? How do we handle this? Because it is really a very serious issue in marriage.
All right, thank you so much. Mrs. Wanda, can we allow them to ask the question, then you can respond to them, or you want to respond individually?
I think I prefer to respond individually.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Okay, so let me respond to her. She talked about the punishment for domestic violence for the abusers. I think we have a 14-year jail term if convicted, or there's a fine. It's either you pay the fine. I'm not sure if it's, I don't know, I can't remember exactly how much it is, but there's a fine that you should, the abuser ought to pay or will serve the jail term if convicted. And then you were talking about female gender mutilation and circumcision. Why is it that female gender mutilation is seen as abuse or violence against the girl child? You would agree with me that the clitoris is a part of a woman's body that gives pleasure in sexual intercourse. But for the man, the foreskin around the penis it's not for sexual pleasure, but for his health and hygiene of his private part. So that's why the foreskin is neatly removed, so that the male child is less prone to infections and other related complications with that foreskin hanging right there. But for the woman, the clitoris is supposed to be there. It's not causing any infection. Instead, it's even there for a positive reason. So cutting it off is cruel. And the reason they chop off the clitoris of the girl child is so that they will not have sexual urge and they will not be interested in sexual activities, which to me is wrong, because a girl child will definitely reach the age of sexual need, which is, I mean, even before 18, but I mean, as an adult from 18, she should be allowed to carry out sexual activities. Then I hope that is answered. And then you also talked about dressing. Why is it that should the dressing of a woman matter if she wears a short dress? Men in the market or in those ghetto or in different areas, you don't have to wear a short skirt for them to whistle at you. I have gone to the market wearing jeans and t-shirt, and those boys in the market be whistling, "This your bakasi." Now foam you put inside, they whistle and they're following you and they're saying nasty things. So it's not about what you are wearing, but it's about the mind of the abuser. Because, this thing has to be very, very clear. In our campaigns, in our sensitization, and in all our work that we do, we need to make it very, very clear that rape or sexual harassment is caused by the abuser, not the victim. Because if you begin to justify why a lady walks on the streets and boys are whistling, it's very, very disrespectful. I don't know how many boys walk on the streets and girls sit down to begin to whistle that, oh, a guy is even passing where he's wearing a boxer, or he's bare-chested and he's on the streets, or he's wearing his singlet, which is an underwear. Those things don't even happen to the male folks. So the men and the boys ought to be taught to respect women and girls. So the behavioral change should be with the abusers, not the victims. And what the woman wears is not the cause of rape or sexual abuse or harassment. I would say that 100 times. If the dressing was the cause of sexual abuse, then we won't have 2-year-old girls, 1-year-old, 6-month-old, 3, we will not have minors being raped every blessed day. So that, I hope, is also clear. And then you also talked about abusive partners. I think you already explained that point about, couples understanding their temperaments and all of that. Yes, it makes a lot of sense. But when it's too much, I will always advise that you can actually walk away from abusive relationships. You can walk away from abusive relationships. And then you talked about consent or sex in marriage. The Bible says, do not deprive your partner. I'm sure you know that it's both ways. The man too should not deprive his wife of her sexual needs, and vice versa. And consent is still very, very key. If you love your partner, you will care about the mood she's in. If you're able to convince her to make love to you or have sex with you, then it's good. Women are so fragile and they need to be wooed every time. So men need to understand that women don't like the by force treatment. I know that some women want to be, everybody wants to be treated differently, but it would be nice if we all understand. It all boils down to love and understanding. If a couple understand each other, they know when it is right for them to make love with each other. If the wife denies,
Whoa, seems we lost her.
Okay, like we lost her. Okay, I'm thinking the next questions, if you can wait after the next speaker, we can ask, but then she's back. Okay, she's back. Okay.
Okay.
And okay, thank you so much, Ma. I think we have 2 people who have questions. Please, I want to beg you, just go straight to the question. If you can use 10 seconds to ask the question, she can use 50 seconds to respond, so that in whole we have 2 minutes to all the questions. So let's have Cynthia. Cynthia Anya. Cynthia, you have a question? Okay, she's not here. Mr. Hamza, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to hear Wanda's thoughts on the argument of some ladies who think that, well, I'm the wife, you are the husband, so you should be able to care for me even if I don't work, that I don't even need to work if I have an husband that can take care of me. When you have men with those kind of mindset, how do you ensure that I make right at some point?
Thank you. That's a very sensitive one. In the course of my work with women, I always make it a point of duty to empower them. Empowering women is to ensure that every woman has something to do, either with skills or however she wants to do it. But we just have to keep empowering women and making them understand that as much as they think that is a duty of a man to take care of them, they ought to take care of themselves too. So we will continue campaigning and sensitizing women as we work with them on the importance of empowering themselves. so they don't depend totally on someone.
Thank you.
Okay. Joseph, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you so much. You really done very well, Ma. We are really glad. Your responses are on point. Let's invite our next speaker, Mr. Hamza Ajibola, to take us on the next topic. Mr. Hamzat.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Joseph, for asking me to be part of this. I am asked to speak to activating action against human rights abuse. And I can assure you that I will try as much as possible to keep to time. So I am going to start by a couple of quotes that I found very fascinating. And I think it's a kind of quote that should guide the actions of those of us who are interested in the human rights protection or fighting against the violations of human rights of others and ourselves. And that is a quote by Professor Wole Soyinka, The Man Dies. I don't know who has read that book before. The man dies in awe, who keeps silent in the face of tyranny. So what Prof is trying to say there is that all of us, the only thing that can qualify us to be a living person is for us to always be able to speak up, especially when we witness any action that violates the right of others. Anytime we keep quiet, when we see the right of other human beings, or even our own rights being violated, and we're not saying anything about it, then the man in us is dead. And that means that we are as good as a dead man. The other quote is that of Edmund Burke, who said that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. So if all good men decide to keep quiet and do nothing when evil triumphs, then our society can never be better. So as good men, we must at all times ensure that we speak up whenever we see any right of human beings or our own rights being violated. And I find these two quotes to be very, very instructive to what we're doing. As a matter of fact, when I got the message from Joseph, I was thinking that I probably will be speaking to young people who probably have not had experience of how to handle human rights violations. But coming here, I realized that the audience are people who are already well educated and informed about the subject matter. So there's little or nothing you can say that the current audience are not already aware of. But it's also very important for us to keep reminding ourselves of what we do and how we need to continue to do what we're doing. And that is the relevance I find in having this conversation with you. It's a conversation as far as I'm concerned because I expect every other person to also interject and share their thoughts on what I'm talking about. Of course, talking about the right of Nigerians and our own rights, the Nigerian Constitution is very clear as to all the rights of every citizen. Chapter 4 of the Nigerian Constitution specifies about the fact that every Nigerian has a right to life. So at any time we see any human being, man or woman, trying to take the life of another person, it's a right violation and it's a breach of the Constitution. And we should be able to speak up when we see that kind of a thing happen. The Constitution also guarantees the right to dignity, the dignity of all human beings, either woman or man. The question of rape that we're talking about also borders on the issue of dignity. If somebody says that, look, I do not want to be touched in a particular place, or I do not want to be addressed in a particular way, or I do not want to be handled in a particular way, I think it's a right that should be respected, because the Constitution guarantees that right for every Nigerian. The right to dignity of all man, woman, or man. And then the right to liberty. So the entire section 4 of the Nigerian Constitution actually stated different rights that every Nigerian should have access to. And when we witness anyone violating those rights, we have a duty to speak up or to challenge those right violations. I will mention two other more, and then I'll move on to other things. There's also the right to the freedom of thought and conscience and religion. That people should have right to how they want to worship, and they should have a right to whatever thoughts that they have. And at any time, when they express those rights, that right must be protected. And that is why the case of this young man in Kano is very, very striking for me. The Kano singer, I don't know whether we read about him, Yahya Haminu Sharif, the guy who is now being, I think is on death row now, because the Sharia court said that he sang a particular song that is defaming Prophet Muhammad. And because of that, he deserves to die. Whereas the ground none of Nigerian law, the Constitution, specifies that people should have the right or the freedom to express their thoughts and the freedom of conscience and religion. If you don't agree, then you can bring all your own thoughts and your own conscience and your own ideas. But it is what it is in Nigeria now. So Constitution guarantees quite a number of rights that all Nigerians should enjoy. Right of expression, the right to hold opinion, the right to assemble, and the right to associate with anybody who wants to choose to associate with. The greatest law in Nigeria is the Constitution, and that law guarantees those rights. But we may ask, who are those ones who are perpetually violating the rights of Nigerians? We have done several cases, we have handled several cases in the ICR. I'm talking about investigation that we have done in a number of times. And most of them is about the security agents, the Nigerian police, the DSS, the Nigerian army, and even the road safety and the rest. These are the people that we have found violating the rights of Nigerians most of the time. Despite the fact that these are the people who go about violating the rights of Nigerians. And I'm very certain that the majority of us who are here have experienced several cases of right violation that we have handled in the course of our job. I know that a number of times I've reported on the police who were being called to handle the case of rape, but they were also the one also violating the rights of the victims. We have handled several of those cases. So security agents are those ones that we've identified that are majorly violating the rights of Nigerians. Yeah, but that does not mean that individual persons are not also violating rights. I mean, most of the things that we have also talked about today borders on what one person does to other person. Husband violating the right of wife, and the wife also violating the rights of husband. And even strangers, someone you don't know at all, violating the right of another person. So how do we handle this situation? How do we act? How do we activate action against all these right abuses? Well, as a journalist and as somebody who specializes in investigation, one thing that usually comes to mind to me is when you witness those kind of right violation incidents, the first thing that should come to mind is to collect evidence. and collect as many as you can at that particular point in time. Try to make sure that whoever that is violating the right of another person, the identity of that person, you get the evidence of it. Get the evidence of the action of that person. And get the evidence of where that particular action is taking place. Once you are able to do that, then you have actually handled the first stage. But that is not enough. You also need to ensure that the evidence you gather, how do you amplify it? Whom can you reach out to help you amplify those evidence so that everybody, every Nigerian will see it? One thing that we have found out is that anyone who is doing bad things, they don't want other people to know about it. Even Satan, who is notorious for doing wicked things, they love to do that in secrecy. They don't want others to know about it. So what you should do as somebody who is trying to act against human rights abuse is to make sure that when you collect those evidence, you share the evidence with the rest of Nigerians, with the public, amplify it. How do you do that? There are 1,001 media organizations in Nigeria that you can share your evidence with. And many of them will run it as news item, if you can do that. I don't know if you remember the case of a particular woman in Ogun State who I think came out during this COVID-19 lockdown. And she was being arrested together with her husband by some local government officials. And then they were harassing her and doing everything, assaulting her, and took her car to the office and impounded the car and did all kinds of things that were not allowed by law. While they were doing all this thing, the woman was videoing them. She videoed every single actions of those officials and ensured that their faces were captured as well. At the end of the day, she uploaded that, I think on Twitter, and then shared some with some news organization. We got a hold of it and we reported it. I'm aware that Sarah reported, the cable and the premium time also got a hold of it. And at the same time, everybody reported about that singular action. The governor of Ogun State was very embarrassed. The governor himself had to call the chairman of the local government. What is this thing happening? So the chairman had no option than to act. Those men, as we speak today, are fired, and they are remain fired. So that's the kind of thing I'm saying, that when you have incidents of right violation, the first thing that we should do is to collect as much evidence as possible. And when we collect those evidence, you share that evidence with the media organization that you can reach. You can also call on to some of the NGOs like Wanda Adu Foundation, who handles the case of children and women, or SOAS, who also handle a similar case. Call their attention to it. They can also help you to amplify those kind of rights violation. Or you reach out to a number of media influencers, and we have many of them who are very, very willing to share any issue of right violation. I know for certain who at many times have shared videos of husband kicking the wife and government official doing all kinds of untoward things to another person, all those things. So influential, so you can reach out to them. There was a man on Twitter called Segaling. Segaling has handled several cases of police abuse, especially the SARS. If you go today that even the police are also the perpetrators of rights violation. But the law says that any unlawful thing that happens, we should report to them. So if for the purpose of fulfilling all the righteousness, I think it's also important that we look for the nearest police station and report it and document it for the purpose of record. That is on record that a particular incident of right violation happened at a particular place by a particular person, and it is documented by the law enforcement agents. I think it's also important that we do that. For those of us who are literate enough, I remember in the past, before the emergence of social media, there's something called letter to the editor. People write all kinds of letters to the editor in those days. I doubt whether many people do that again, but it is still a very, very relevant tool of actually activating action against human rights violation. You can write a letter to the editor, choose an editor that you know that these people are known for standing up against the abuse of human rights. And you do them a letter and tell them that, look, this is what I saw at a particular place. And this is the person that I saw doing it. And this is the time that I saw this happen. And here are the evidences that I collected when I witnessed this. I think every reasonable editor will be very excited to have those kind of factual reporting about human rights abuse. And of course, perhaps the last resort is you go to court. If you have the means, I know that many of the people whose rights are being violated do not have means to go to court. But of course, there are people who also have means to intend to, allocate all cases to God to handle. And these are the actions that are carried out by men. When men violate law, there are places where their violation can be treated and they can be sent to where they belong. But when you now say you hand them over to God, that's, in a way, it's not an action that can actually promote a just society, a society that every human right will be protected. It is not the right thing to do. So I'm going to conclude by saying that if you witness any violations of human rights, either to someone that you know or to someone that you don't know, or even to yourself, the next thing is not to start praying to God so that you can be avenged. I think the right thing or the next thing to do is actually to fight for your rights and also fight for the right of others. When men know that when they break the law that is set up by men, they can actually proceed. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Very brief, thank you. And we are almost getting close to the end of the program. We have the next topic coming up, but before then, let's give room to 2 questions to ask questions. Please, if you're asking a question, just use 30 seconds to ask, so he can use 30 seconds to respond. Any question? Oh, okay. Any question? All right. Okay.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, all right, go ahead, ma.
I have a question. Okay, so I work with vulnerable women and children. And for the past 2 months, we've experienced several cases of missing children that have been reported to the police. In fact, last week, a child was the child was kidnapped already at Jahi, and the court, as he was trying to escape with the 4-year-old girl, the community members, I think the mother of the child came out of the house and was looking for the girl. And then she didn't find the girl. So as she shouted out, the neighbors actually saw the man quickly. She answered from the man's, hands. And when she shouted, the man, was terrified and he dropped her and was running. So the community members raised alarm, kidnapper, kidnapper. And they quickly ran. And he was trying to scale the fence and they apprehended him. dragged him red-handed to the police. And when they got to the police station, the police said that no, that the guy has mental issues. Immediately they got to the police station, that was what the police said. So the parents of the girl were really upset. And 2 days before that day, they kidnapped a 4-year-old boy. I've published, that he's missing and all of that, and nothing has been done about it till now. Now, in cases like this where, the police, there's an issue like this in a community, and the police is aware, and they are doing nothing about these missing children. I have 3 cases of missing children in the same Jahi now, between that time, Jahi and Gishiri, within the last 2 months. Now, who do we run to if the police is not able to search for missing children? What would be your advice? Is it to go ahead and write, or still write to an editor, or what would you say?
Thank you very much. I said in my presentation that one thing that is very key is the collection of evidence. Going out of those kind of operations. Of course, the ideal thing would be like you have a journalist going with you so that he can or she can help report every single details of that event. But both you and I know that that's not realistic. So what you can do is in your team, just hand somebody with a phone and let that person record every single activity. So if, for instance, you are able to capture the man who tried to do that, if you're able to get his face, for instance, if you're able to get how he's running, if you're able to get all the conversation that people have during that time, and you're able to also record the moment you arrive at the police station, and the IPO that you are speaking with, we are able to record the conversation that you have with him, if possible, even get the face of the IPO. Then you have done a good job of great investigative journalism. And all you need to do is just hand it over to the ICR or the Sahara reporter or whatever. Maybe they can do 2 things to it, but at least you have done a great part of the job.
Sorry to cut you short. The man that was a kidnapper that was trying to escape has been apprehended. With all the noise that was made, the community members, the police didn't have a choice but to apprehend him. So he's still in custody, but they are still claiming that he has a mental issue.
So whoever that is claiming that, if you have that details, like to have it so that the police officer who is claiming that he has mental issues,
I will share with you. Because
yes, no problem.
I confronted the officers, and their responses were not satisfactory. So I'm willing to work with you on it.
I mean, it's not enough that you just make a statement that the guy has a mental issue. How did he arrive at that conclusion?
That was the argument. Yes.
They carry out any test on him too. So those kind of questions ask people to the police themselves to come out and say that you have to account for whatever actions and actions.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I want to ask a question.
Okay,
There's one serious case in my community that happened presently now. So the WHO's organization came to our community to assist those people, though especially the infants that are here to be sponsored. They want to sponsor them for educational needs. So, and they are required them to register for the birth certificate with the government. So where are those people that they assigned as a person to do the job for them? So they went to the local government chairman that they need their certificate. And the total numbers of the children they want to sponsor, the WHO want to sponsor is like about 2,000 plus. That are working in the local government, they are requesting money from the WHO to be paid. Is it proper? Is it those children? They are Nigerians, so they are not from outside, so they have the right. And according to what you said in the Constitution, you saw everybody had the right as a citizen of this country. So I don't know how our government or maybe civil servants are requesting money or the birth certificate?
Yes, I am aware that Nigerian Population Commission has at some point said that birth certificate is free and that every Nigerian has a right to have certificate of his or her birth. So if those ones report to the NPC, because NPC is actually the agency that is directly involved, if they report to the NPC, it's not even the responsibility of the local government. Probably at the local government, there is an agent of the NPC at the local government. So if they go to the NPC and say to NPC, hey, some of your agents at the local government, they are requesting us to pay for birth certificate, they will call them to order. We have done that to some people in the Imo State and Anambra before, and they were able to call them to order. So my advice to you is to ask those children to go to the office of the National Population Commission and ask how they can get their birth certificate without being paid for.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, I have a question. Can I speak?
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so quickly, sir, you mentioned, you talked about a video that went viral about a woman and man, that were harassed by security or law enforcement agents and all that. Now, my question now is, I see some of these videos, right? Now, how do I know? I'm thinking, is it possible that we can have this post as they come up, as these issues arise? Can we have feedback videos too, or feedback responses that lets us know that whatever we are posting and we post it on internet or whatever, justice has been served? Because I only know that those people were recorded. I never knew that, I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. I never knew that, okay, these people have been fired or something. Because the more we know that if this post that people send, things are actually done about it, then we can always, want to post and know that something will be done. It's making sense. So is it possible? Is there a channel? Is there a way that when these things are posted, we can follow through to know that this issue is being sorted or is already being looked at?
So in my observation, we try to do that. So when there's a problem and we report about it. So when there is an outcome from that particular incident, we also report about it. So if you go to, on the ICR page, there's a section called impact. So on the impact page, that's where we report about the outcome of whatever engagement we carry out from our own journalistic point of view. So any of those issues, we try to report about it. So that's how you can know from the ICR. I don't know how other news organizations do it, but I think some, if they pick it up, they also report about it. But in our organization, we always try to follow up on some of those things. And when something eventually happens, we report about it. And we put it on a particular section for our audience to see.
Sorry, sir. I want to ask questions. I'm sorry. So concerning the program that is going on presently in line, like BB Nigeria, is it advisable for parents to allow their children to be watching the program because the program is exposed with pornographic image where the children is normally practiced, and this is not the normal thing they should be allowed the children to be watching? Is it normal? Please, sir. Maybe you can share the more highlight on it, sir.
Well, I would say it's the right of everybody to choose to watch what they want to watch and what they will not want to watch. I probably would not encourage my own children to watch it, but other parents might feel differently about it. So it's a question of how you view what happens in Nigeria. But for those of us who do this kind of journalism, we think that to really build a very strong citizenship and to build a very strong country, a democratic country where citizens are going to be active participants, a program like BB Nigeria is not the kind of program that is going to raise our level of consciousness. So, and that is why do not really go for those kind of programs. So, but like I said, it's a question of rights. But whether that kind of show, it's going to help you have the consciousness that will allow you to engage the government in a very active way, it's another story. I will not encourage my own children, but some parents might do that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, sir. And we just have to move to the next one. And I want to especially appreciate you, sir, because you've really touched the areas I would have even wanted to say. You have set a table for us to get to the next topic, which is about TALKAM, Human Rights Project. Of course, the essence of this is to stimulate our interest to monitor and report human rights abuses. You know, he said something that evil triumph, not because of people that do evil, or because of people that see evil and keep silent. If you put it in other way around, human rights abuse triumph or increase, not because of people that perpetrate the abuse, but because of people who see this abuse and keep quiet, basically because they think it's not directly affecting them or someone that related to them. But the thing is that nobody is immune to human rights abuse. We're all vulnerable in one way or the other. And it is also right to realize that we have a role to play in tackling human rights abuse. And that is why we created this project called TALKAM Human Rights Project. So TALKAM Human Rights Project is basically meant to engage citizens to start observing and reporting human rights issue. And if you look at it, what is even human rights? You know, every human has a right. If you look at what is on the screen now, we have human and right. Who is a human? A Homo sapien, a species, a man and a woman. And then what is right? Things which you are entitled to, which you are allowed to have, freedom that you are guaranteed. So human rights simply means the right you have simply because you're human. And abuse comes when such rights are denied, are restricted, or even, you know, abuse or something like that. So this is what we call human rights abuse. And this happens to us regularly. But in TALKAM Human Rights Project, the focus basically is on human rights on the area of freedom from torture and violence, which of course is very rampant now. Would this include rape, gender-based violence, human trafficking, and all the rest of them? You know, the topic human rights is very big. Some people deal with human rights in place of work, you know, economic right, right to education. But our own now, we are focusing basically on violence against persons, which revolve around trafficking, rape, gender-based violence, and others. And most times people think that people who fight human rights abuse are people who have been affected. But on a personal standpoint, I don't think we need to be affected before we start taking action against human rights abuse. No, we have to take it because it's our responsibility. And if you don't do something, who knows who will be the next victim? It might be your children, it might be your grandchildren, someone close to you. So I want us to see it as if something that we're doing, not just for our sake, but for the sake of our generation and the next generation. And that is why we have to start doing something. And on this TALKAM human rights abuse, you know, from the word talk, TALKAM, so the essence, if you look at it, is a pidgin English. We wanted to make sure that people see things and talk. We have a slang we usually use on our radio program. It goes like this. If you see rape and you don't report rape, that means you support rape. If you see human trafficking and you keep silent, that means you support it. If you see gender-based violence and you don't report it, that means you support it. But a number of times we also realize that reporting most signs have been a bit difficult because most time people think they have to write a letter to Nigerian police or travel all the way to Nigerian police or to NAPTIP or to organizations, you know, before they can report. So which give them an excuse. Oh, since I don't have transportation, I don't really have time to go out there and report. Let me just leave it. But we have created a tool that is just at the tip of your finger. So you don't even need to leave your comfort zone to report human rights abuse. So you don't need to leave your comfort zone to report human rights abuse. So all you need is to use your handset. So you have a tool, your smartphone, and then the TALKAM app. We created the TALKAM app last 2 years, and it's just basic. You can use it to report human rights abuse, any form of human rights abuse. So right nowadays, you don't even need to travel. You just stay in your house, take up your phone, visit www.talkam.org from talkam.org. You can also download the app on Google Play Store. So use it, upload the picture you have, just type few words. If you don't want to mention your name, you can go ahead, but give us the basic, the detail that we need, which will help us to, trace the perpetrator or the victim that have been abused. So you see that it's becoming easy now for us to report human rights abuse. And this TALKAM is not about any organization. It can be used anywhere in Nigeria. It's not about DevaTop. Any organization can use it to report. And when you report, what we do, we use at our back end, we look at the report. And if it's something that requires NAPTIP to get involved, we engage NAPTIP. And some of this report, because we have so many human rights organizations, so if, for example, the report is coming to Abia State, and we have some organizations in Abia State that are dealing with human rights abuse, what we do is to engage them. We have these reports. Please, can you help investigate and rescue the victim? And if such report requires, before the thing is investigated, it requires it to be published. Of course, our partner, our supporter is the ICR, International Center for Investigative Reporting. So they help us to, push it up so that the public can be aware of what is happening. But the summary of the whole thing is this. In this 21st century, nobody has an excuse of not reporting human rights abuse. No, you don't have an excuse. The tools are in your hand. You can even use social media to report. Please, I want to encourage us that the essence of this training is not just for us to understand human rights abuse, understand that there is high rate of rape. The essence is for us to take action. And that is why Mr. Hamza has spoken about activating action against human rights abuse. See, things are happening. See, what we are hearing, the kind of abuse we are hearing is just a tip of an iceberg compared to what is actually happening. There are things we have even failed to recognize. Last 3 years, we did a training and trained some young people. And there is this particular young person who has been seeing trafficking happening very close to his doorstep, but he didn't want to say anything. But after the training, he realized that he has a role to play and he reported. And because of that report, the girl was able to be rescued. So who knows the kind of life, who knows how many lives will be lost if you don't report? Just ask yourself a question. If I see this, I don't report, who knows what will happen next? Who knows how many people that have died because of people that have kept silent? So this is for us to think about it. We have to take action and nothing but action against human rights abuse. And that is why this training is very important. ICR has supported us to carry out a different awareness on human rights abuse. We have been doing a weekly radio program on Wazobia FM, which can be watched live, which is talking about different abuses. We even go to the extent of talking about abuse against boys and men. And that is why you also see that even boys are experiencing human rights abuse. So most times, if you have a report about a boy being abused, don't neglect it. Don't think it's only women that can be abused. No, boys are also being abused. So I want to appreciate you all for taking time to participate in this training. And this is not just the only training we'll be having this year. This is just the first episode. We'll have your details. The subsequent training will also be engaging you. But I want to encourage you, please, before the end of this training, before the end of today, make our time, visit Google Play Store to download the TALKAM app. And before I conclude, I want to also let us know what we plan to do on TALKAM human rights project. It has about 3 or 4 components. The first one is to monitor and report human rights abuses using the TALKAM app. That's one of the things. Another thing is human rights stories and articles. Some of you can write articles. please, if you're here and you have a lot of articles to write on different issues, there are silent issues about human rights abuse they can write on. Please do that. Send to us on the TALKAM. And of course, ICI can also publish it as well. Then we're also thinking of conducting surveys. Some of you are from different states. After now, we might be conducting surveys in your state to look at the kind of human rights abuse that is prevalent in your state. So we also want to engage you as well to conduct such a survey. Of course, to write reports, press statements, campaign messages, and all the rest of them. In the next 1 month, we'll be launching our TALKAM social media campaign, which we're using social communication change method to address so many issues on human rights. So we also engage you as well. But in summary, if you see something, say something. And if you don't say something, that means you are supporting that thing. I want to appreciate you for being a part of this training. And this is organized by Devatop Center for Africa Development and is being supported by International Center for Investigative Reporting and Institute for War and Peace Reporting. And I also encourage you, please, if you look at the chat, just go to the chat, you will see the form I posted. In case you cannot access the form, I have posted the questions on the chat. So what you do, attend to the questions, your full name, gender, phone number, email address, state, country, the action you want to take. You can send it to our email address, talkam@gmail.com. So that will help us to document every other thing that we have. Thank you so much. Because of time, I had to stop here. And if you have any question, any contribution, we use the next 3 minutes or 4 minutes to, attend to your questions or to hear you. I know there are so many human rights experts on this platform, so please be free to share your thoughts. Thank you. Any question? Any comments?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you for inviting me to this platform. So, and I'm very happy to join this platform because actually I was one of the members of SDG, and I'm one of the members of humanitarian service in my communities, which is leadership experience and opportunity. So, and this kind of opportunities have been trying to be expressive because it's give me a joy, it give me a morale to express what is happening in my communities, especially not only in my community, throughout my country, because I've served in Southeast, I've went to many states, I know the way they normally suffer. But one thing I would just like employ you is that maybe you should be talk to our government, they should take in part in human rights. People are complaining, they don't take action, they don't follow the actions. People are complaining, they don't follow the actions. Maybe what is happening to those people are not affecting their families, are not affecting their relatives. So that's why they don't take any actions on it. People are complaining about kidnapping, people are complaining about child abuse, especially for recently. I can remember about 3 months or 4 months ago, the one woman that was doing human trafficking in Omao, so she was complaining that she doesn't have any money to go back to Nigeria until our government investigates about the issue. So they think the video is viral on social media. So that's the reason why they have to take an action on it. If the woman does not share the videos on social media, our government will not take any action on it at all. So I would like to employ you, maybe our government should take any action whenever they require about human rights. What they are doing in this country is not the same thing they are doing in overseas. You understand? Actually, I just came back from Dubai about 3 weeks ago. I learned something, what they are doing over there, that make their country to be peaceful and normal. You understand?
Yes.
What I learned from them is that even their daughter, their children, they know how to protect them. because they have a normal way of child protection for them. You understand? You can't say any foreigner just to abuse their children, because the way they will take the actions, the way they will take the fine person, even they can easily deport the person from their country that they don't want it. If you can easily employ that new idea they are doing in overseas, I noticed that most of our politicians, most of our government, they have traveled to all overseas, all the European countries, and they know the way they are doing over there. Why can't you employ the new method, the new idea they are doing to reduce the child abuse, the human rights trafficking, sexual harassment over there? If you can employ that new idea they are doing, I think this country will grow more than the way you don't expect it. So that's the only advice I can give you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your comments and your suggestion. Very, very well. Of course, there are so many human rights abuses even perpetrated by the government, by individuals, by leaders. But, we don't even need to wait for government to act. And one of the things we need to do is also hold our government accountable. In your local government, in your state, a lot of things are happening. And it's not good to just sit back and say, because I'm not doing anything, let me just keep quiet. No, you have to hold them accountable. It's a movement. Human rights is part of movement everyone should be part of. So I want to appreciate you, and we've taken note of what you've said. Any other comments?
Okay. Yes, I have a quick question.
Okay.
It just dawned on me now. I think I realized that some people, one of the issues that they might have in reporting issues when they come up is their safety. We know the country that we're in. Do we have anything? I don't know if Mr. Amzat is still available, but then is there any, do we have any law that, or whatever, that protects activists and all? Because I know this puts a lot of the human rights activists in the forefront before people. I know that they can easily become targets of wicked-minded people that are in places of authority and the rest of that. So, do we have anything that covers, that stands as a protection for human rights activists?
Yeah, that's a very good question, I think. And I'm also aware that it's only in Nigeria that when someone is trying to take evidence of human rights violation that is going on, that person himself can be a victim. You can't even carry your phone in some places and say you want to record. Once the policeman sees you, they will probably seize your phone and break it right there. Before you are allowed to go. During the course of reporting, I've gone through that kind of experience myself. So, but we have devised different ways of, taking some of these records in my office. So if I am going to record you now, it probably might be a little bit difficult for you to find out, especially when I know that I'm going to record something like that. So usually I keep you see my breast pocket, this is my breast pocket. So I keep my phone in a way that the camera height is outside. I've already set up my phone and the camera height is outside. So, and I'm coming closer to you and I'm going to be asking you a question. And my phone is your face and maybe some of your voice. And if I'm able to get your number, that makes it easy. Then I can easily use my Truecaller to find your true name, or go and use your number to check your image on WhatsApp. Because I know that most people who have phones have WhatsApp accounts, and they usually put their photograph on WhatsApp. So if I'm able to get your face, then I will take your name to the Facebook and go and search for your name. You can mark the photograph on your Facebook with the photograph on your WhatsApp. Once I'm able to establish all that, then I'm able to see that, okay, is a person that has this phone that holds that's this person. And I might even find out a little more information about you, probably where you work or where you worship. your pastor, know your imam, know some other things about you. So I will collect a lot of evidence about you even before you know it, and then I will release it. So sometimes it takes being very careful, because we know that most of these guys, they are also aware that once somebody gets an evidence against them, it could be very, very difficult. So it's still possible, but we have to be very careful about it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
sir.
you so much.
Thank you. We have, last 2-3 years, we have this report. Our volunteer reported a case of a young girl, about 17 years, who had been under domestic violence. She was used as a house slave. So when she reported the case to us and to NAPTIP, it's like along the line, the perpetrator or the husband to the madam realized that she was the one that reported, that she was the neighbor. So she called the police, even threatened her. So when the case came to us, in fact, we didn't even know. I think she spoke out, and the man realized that she was the one. When the case came to us, we engaged NAPTIP and we called the man for threatening of life, and the man signed an undertaking that if anything happens to her, she'll be held responsible. So that was one of the things we did. But however, we wish such thing didn't happen. And we started telling our volunteers, most times when you report, it depends on the level of advocacy you are engaging. If you're an activist, you don't even mind. We have activists that they don't mind putting their life on the line, they can mention their name. But however, if you also prefer to be anonymous in your reporting, it's also good. And so many organizations have policy on, protecting the image of the reporter. And so many reporting platform also has that. For example, on the TALKAM, we have option. If you're reporting through the TALKAM app, you have an option. If you want to report anonymous, it's okay. Just don't put your name, just give details. Enough detail that can help trace the perpetrator or the victim. That is enough. But if you also want to be contacted as well, that is okay. But in our dealing with you, we make sure that we don't put you in the picture. And of course, I know so many organizations do that, even SOA Initiative, they make sure they don't put you in the picture of the whole thing. Even if when we are engaging the law enforcement agent. Oh God, this has gone up. Baby, the internet. Oh God. Ah, my internet don't go. The internet has gone up. No, I know.
Are you using your phone internet?
Let me use my. So you need it. And of course, it's also live on our Facebook. You can also go there to see what we have. After now, we can put it on our YouTube channel for you to watch. We'll be following you up, with series of email and letting you know our next plan, our next projects. And if there are possible assignments that we have for you, we'll send you an email.